The alarm clock buzzed at 4:30 a.m. and Shanice Williams reached over to silence it before it woke up her grandmother in the next room. The apartment was quiet and dark as she slipped out of bed, her feet finding the cold floor. Another day. Another dollar, she thought to herself, the same phrase her grandma had repeated throughout Shanice's childhood. At 27, this wasn't where Shanice had pictured herself, not after earning her business degree with honors 4 years ago. But jobs were scarce, and Crispy Chicken Supreme had been meant to be a stepping stone, not a final destination. She dressed quietly in her uniform, the polyester pants that never quite fit right and the bright yellow polo shirt with the company logo that she'd ironed the night before. Her natural hair was carefully wrapped in a protective style that would fit under the required cap. Last month, the regional manager had made comments about her braids looking unprofessional, so she'd adapted, like she always did. The bus was nearly empty at this hour. Shanice used the time to review flashcards on her phone for the management certification exam she was studying for. If she could just get promoted to assistant manager, the pay increase would help her grandmother get the medical care she needed. 4 times she'd applied for management positions. 4 times she'd been passed over. "Morning, Shanice," called the security guard as she approached the strip mall where Crispy Chicken Supreme sat between a discount shoe store and a pharmacy. The restaurant wouldn't open for another 2 hours, but prep work needed to be done. "Morning, Mr. Thompson," she replied with a genuine smile. He was one of the few bright spots in her day, an older man who treated everyone with respect regardless of their job title. Inside, the lights flickered on to reveal the empty restaurant. Shanice tied her apron around her waist and began her opening routine, counting the register, checking inventory, prepping the fryers. The routine was so familiar she could do it with her eyes closed. By 6:30 a.m., other workers began to trickle in. First was Dion, a high school student who worked mornings before class. Then came Lisa, a middle-aged woman who handled the drive-through window with military precision. "Hey, girl," Lisa said, hanging up her coat. "Ready for another exciting day in paradise?" Shanice laughed. "Always ready. Heard Richard's visiting today." Lisa's face fell. "Regional Manager Richard, Lord give me strength. That man could find fault with Jesus himself." Richard Keller had been regional manager for the past 2 years, overseeing 7 Crispy Chicken locations. He was known for his critical inspections and for playing favorites. Shanice had never been one of those favorites. "Just keep your head down," Lisa advised, patting Shanice's shoulder. "Don't give him any reason to zero in on you." The morning rush came and went without incident. Shanice moved efficiently between stations, helping wherever needed. She'd learned every position in the restaurant, from the grill to the register to inventory management. The store manager, Pete, relied on her even if he never said so directly. At precisely 11:30 a.m., Richard walked through the door. The atmosphere in the restaurant instantly changed, like someone had turned down the temperature. He was tall, with thinning hair carefully combed over, wearing a button-down shirt with the company logo and carrying his signature clipboard. "Pete," he called out, barely acknowledging the workers. "Let's talk numbers." Pete emerged from the back office looking nervous. "Of course, Richard, we're up 3% from last month." "Not good enough," Richard replied loudly enough for everyone to hear. "Downtown location is up 7%. What's your excuse?" As they disappeared into the office, Shanice continued, serving customers with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. She'd overheard enough of these conversations to know that downtown had twice the foot traffic and none of the equipment issues their location struggled with daily. The lunch rush hit hard, a line forming out the door. Shanice moved with practiced efficiency, taking orders, packing bags, and keeping the line moving. "We need more ranch cups," called Tyler, a newer employee who'd been hired 3 months ago. Despite his limited experience, Tyler had already been given more responsibility than Shanice. She grabbed a box from storage and brought it to the front, sliding past Richard, who had emerged from the office and was watching the operations with narrowed eyes. "Williams," he said, stopping her. "Your name tag is crooked." Shanice adjusted it silently. "And those shoes don't look like regulation. The employee handbook clearly states black non-slip shoes." "These are non-slip, sir," Shanice replied evenly. Standard issue from the company supplier. Richard made a note on his clipboard. They look worn. Unprofessional. Consider replacing them. She bit back the response that formed in her mind, that she'd requested new shoes through the employee equipment form 3 times. Instead, she nodded and continued working. During a brief lull, Shanice checked her phone to find an email from the community college where she took night classes. Her financial aid application had been denied. Again. The knot in her stomach tightened. Without that aid, she'd have to drop her business management course. Williams, no phones during shifts, Richard called from across the restaurant. Other employees quickly slid their phones into their pockets, but only Shanice had been singled out. The afternoon dragged on. Shanice's feet ached, but she maintained her composure and efficiency. A group of businessmen in suits came in, clearly from the office building down the street. "I'll take their order," said Tyler, moving toward the register. Shanice knew why. These men were good tippers, sometimes slipping cash to whoever helped them. As Shanice wiped down tables, she overheard Richard talking to Pete near the drink station. "That new kid, Tyler. He's got potential. Fast learner. Good with customers." "He's doing well," Pete agreed. "Shanice has been helping train him." Richard glanced over at Shanice. Well, I'm considering him for the shift supervisor opening at the mall location. He's got the right look for it. Professional. Customers respond well to that." The right look. Shanice had heard variations of this phrase throughout her professional life. She knew exactly what it meant. When her break finally came, Shanice sat in the back room and pulled out her worn notebook. In it, she tracked every incident, every comment, every time she'd been passed over. 4 years of documentation, meticulous and detailed. Sometimes she wondered why she bothered. What would she ever do with it? The door swung open and Lisa walked in, collapsing into a chair beside her. "That man," Lisa whispered, "is the devil, in discount dress shoes." She nodded toward the front where Richard was still making rounds. "You know, he just told Pete that our customer satisfaction scores are too low because we're not relatable enough to the clientele. The clientele is 65% black and brown in this neighborhood." Shanice closed her notebook. "I heard he's pushing Tyler for the supervisor position at the mall." "Tyler? Boy barely knows how to count the register." Lisa shook her head. "You've applied. For every opening, you've got a degree, for heaven's sake." "The right look," Shanice said quietly. Lisa understood immediately. She reached over and squeezed Shanice's hand. "Don't let them dim your light, honey. My mama used to say that the people who try to bring you down are already below you." When break ended, Shanice returned to find Richard instructing Tyler on register operations, her register where she'd been working all day. "Williams," Richard said without looking up. "Pete needs help in the back with inventory." Inventory was typically done after closing, but Shanice nodded and headed to the back. Pete looked surprised to see her. Richard said, "You needed help with inventory?" Pete frowned. "No, we're doing that tonight. But since you're here, can you clean out the walk-in fridge?" Been meaning to get to that. The walk-in was freezing and filthy. Shanice spent the next hour scrubbing shelves and organizing boxes, her hands going numb from the cold. When she emerged, Richard was gone and Tyler was excitedly telling everyone about his potential promotion. "He practically guaranteed it to me," Tyler said. "Said I'm exactly what the company is looking for." Shanice clocked out at 5 p.m., her 12-hour shift complete. As she waited for the bus, she checked her bank account on her phone. After rent, utilities, her grandmother's medications, and the minimum payments on her student loans, she had $43 to last until next payday. The management certification exam fee was $250. The bus arrived, crowded with evening commuters. Shanice stood, holding onto a handrail, too tired to even look at her flashcards. At home, her grandmother was watching the news, a bowl of soup cooling on the TV tray in front of her. "There's my girl," she said warmly. "How was work, baby?" Shanice managed a smile. "Same as always, Grandma. How are you feeling today?" "Oh, these old bones are hanging in there." Her grandmother studied her face. Something happened. I can see it in your eyes. Shanice sat down heavily on the worn couch. Just the usual. Regional manager visited, made comments about my appearance. They're giving another promotion to someone who's been there a fraction of the time I have. Her grandmother reached over and took her hand. Your grandfather dealt with the same thing at the factory for 30 years. He always said they may control the clock, but they don't control your worth. I know, Grandma. But I've got that degree collecting dust, and I'm still wearing a fast food uniform while people with half my qualifications move up. The race isn't given to the swift or the strong, but to the one who endures to the end, her grandmother quoted. Your time is coming. Shanice wasn't so sure. 4 years of enduring hadn't changed anything. She thought about her notebook, filled with evidence of unfair treatment. What was she waiting for? Some sign that things would change on their own? As her grandmother dozed off in front of the TV, Shanice pulled out her laptop, a graduation gift she treasured, and began to research company policies and employee rights. There had to be a way forward that didn't involve simply enduring more of the same. Tomorrow would be another early morning, another long day, another bus ride home. But maybe, just maybe, it was time to stop accepting what was happening and start challenging it. The thought both terrified and energized her. She glanced at her grandmother, peaceful in sleep, and made a silent promise. Things were going to change. Somehow they had to. The lunch rush hit Crispy Chicken Supreme like a tidal wave. The line stretched to the door, the drive-thru wrapped around the building twice, and the kitchen staff scrambled to keep up with orders. Shanice moved with practiced efficiency, handling 3 stations at once while newer employees struggled with basic tasks. Order up for Register 3, she called, sliding a tray of food across the counter while simultaneously entering another order into the system. Behind her, the fryer alarm beeped insistently. Tyler, who should have been watching it, was nowhere to be seen. Shanice rushed over, pulled the basket up, and shook out perfectly golden chicken tenders before they could burn. Where's Tyler? Pete asked, appearing from the back office. Not sure, Shanice replied, already moving back to her register. Haven't seen him for about 15 minutes. Pete's face darkened. 3rd time this week he's disappeared during rush. Shanice said nothing. It wasn't her place to comment on Tyler's frequent breaks or how he always seemed to vanish when things got busy. She just picked up the slack like always. The front door chimed and Shanice looked up to see Richard Keller striding in, followed by a woman in a crisp suit she didn't recognize. Great. Another surprise inspection. Pete, Richard called out. Got a minute? This is Vanessa Chen from Corporate Development. We're discussing the restructuring plan for this district. Pete wiped his hands on his apron and forced a smile. Of course, let's go to the office. As they passed, Richard barely glanced at Shanice, though the woman from corporate gave her a curious look. The lunch rush continued unabated. An elderly woman at the counter squinted at the menu board. The print's so small these days, she complained. What's your senior special? Shanice smiled warmly. We have the 2-piece meal with a side and drink for $6.99. Would you like to try that? The woman nodded gratefully. Yes, dear. And can I get extra napkins? My hands shake a bit. Of course. Shanice rang up the order, making sure to add the senior discount that many cashiers forgot to apply. As she handed the woman her receipt, the customer behind her, a man in an expensive suit, sighed dramatically. Some of us have actual jobs to get back to, he muttered, loud enough for everyone to hear. The elderly woman's face fell. Before Shanice could respond, another customer spoke up. And some of us have basic manners, said a young woman in scrubs. She's moving as fast as she can. The man in the suit scoffed and checked his watch pointedly. Shanice maintained her professional demeanor. I'll be right with you, sir. When it was his turn, the man barely looked at her, staring at his phone while barking his order. Number 3 combo, no pickles, and make it fast this time. Coming right up, Shanice said evenly, punching in his order. That'll be $9.87. He tossed a $10 bill on the counter rather than handing it to her. Keep the change, he said with a smirk, as if 13 cents was a generous tip. Shanice handed him his receipt, her smile never wavering. This was nothing new. Some customers seemed determined to remind fast food workers of their perceived place in the social hierarchy. As the rush finally began to slow, Tyler reappeared, looking suspiciously refreshed. "Where have you been?" Lisa asked from the drive-through window. "We got slammed." Tyler shrugged. "Bathroom break. Can't help when nature calls." He glanced toward the office. "Is that Richard here again? Twice in 1 week?" "With someone from corporate," Shanice confirmed, wiping down her station. Tyler immediately straightened his uniform and ran a hand through his hair. "Corporate, huh? Maybe they're finalizing my promotion." Lisa rolled her eyes behind his back, and Shanice suppressed a smile. Despite everything, she and Lisa had developed a friendship built on shared experiences and silent communication. As the afternoon dragged on, Shanice kept glancing at the office door, wondering what was being discussed behind it. Restructuring usually meant one thing: job cuts. Finally, around 3 o'clock, the door opened. Pete emerged looking stressed, followed by Richard and the corporate woman. "Team meeting tomorrow morning before opening," Pete announced. "Everyone needs to be here by 5 a.m. sharp. Richard has some announcements." A murmur ran through the staff. Early meetings were never good news. "Can we know what it's about?" asked Dion, the high school student who worked mornings. "You'll find out tomorrow," Richard said curtly. "Just be on time." As they headed toward the exit, Richard paused near Shanice's register. "Williams, your drawer was short 175 last week. That's going in your file." Shanice's stomach tightened. She'd never been short before, and she meticulously counted her drawer at the beginning and end of each shift. "Sir, I double-checked my counts. It balanced when I left." Richard raised an eyebrow. "Are you suggesting our accounting department made an error?" The corporate woman who had been observing the interaction spoke up. "Perhaps we should double-check the records, Richard. Mistakes do happen." Richard looked annoyed at the interruption. "Vanessa, we have a system in place. If the drawer is short, it's the cashier's responsibility." Shanice felt all eyes on her. She knew protesting further would only make things worse. "I'll be more careful next time," she said quietly. After they left, Lisa came over. "That man would blame you for rain on a sunny day. Don't let it get to you." But it did get to her. Every small criticism, every minor infraction noted, every opportunity denied. They all added up over time, wearing her down bit by bit. The rest of the shift passed in a blur of routine tasks. As closing time approached, Pete called Shanice into the office. "I need you to help with inventory tonight," he said, looking exhausted. "I know it's not your scheduled duty, but Tyler called to say he can't stay late." "Of course he did." "No problem," Shanice replied, though she'd been planning to study for her certification exam. "I could use the extra hours anyway." Pete looked uncomfortable. "About that, Richard's implementing new budget controls. No overtime approved for the next 2 weeks. But inventory will put me at least 2 hours over my regular shift." "I know. You'll need to come in 2 hours later tomorrow." To balance it out, Shanice did the mental math. Coming in later would mean missing the meeting Richard had called. "But the meeting tomorrow is mandatory," Pete finished, looking genuinely apologetic. "I'm sorry, Shanice, I don't make the rules. It was so transparent, it was almost laughable. Almost." "I understand," she said, though they both knew she didn't. Pete hesitated, then lowered his voice. "Listen, between us, this restructuring they're planning, it doesn't look good. They're consolidating positions across the district. Just start putting out applications. You're too smart to be caught in this mess when it goes down." His concern seemed genuine, and Shanice appreciated the warning. "Thanks, Pete." After he left, Shanice sat in the empty office for a moment, processing. She'd suspected for a while that her days at Crispy Chicken might be numbered, not because of her performance, but because of forces beyond her control. Richard's subtle and sometimes not so subtle campaign against her had been building for months. She pulled out her phone and checked her bank account again. The numbers hadn't magically improved since yesterday. With her grandmother's new medication, costs, she needed this job more than ever. As she began the tedious task of counting inventory, Her mind raced with questions and calculations. How long would it take to find another job? How many months could they survive on her savings if she had to? What would happen to her grandmother's medical care? The stockroom was quiet, except for the hum of the freezer and the scratch of her pen on the inventory clipboard. The task would normally take 2 people at least 3 hours, but Shanice had no choice but to handle it alone. Halfway through counting boxes of French fries, she heard the back door open. Thinking it was the night cleaning crew arriving early, she called out, "I'll be done in here soon." Instead, Lisa appeared around the corner. "Thought you could use some help," she said, grabbing the second clipboard. "Pete told me they stuck you with inventory alone." Shanice felt a rush of gratitude. "Don't you have to get home to your kids?" "My sister's watching them tonight. Besides, this is some straight-up bull and we both know it." Lisa began counting. "Boxes of drink cups. They're trying to set you up to fail, girl." Working together, they finished the inventory in just under 2 hours. As they were preparing to leave, Lisa handed Shanice a folded piece of paper. "My cousin works HR at corporate headquarters," she said quietly. "This is her direct number. If you ever need to file a complaint, bypass the standard channels and call her directly. The Goulart complaint line goes through Richard's office first." Shanice took the paper, touched by Lisa's risk in sharing this information. "Thank you. I've been documenting everything, but I wasn't sure what to do with it all." "Keep documenting," Lisa advised. "And if you decide to make a move, hit up my cousin first. She's good people." Outside, the night was cool and quiet. The bus stop was empty this late, the streets nearly deserted. "Need a ride?" Lisa asked, pulling out her car keys. "It's no trouble." "That would be amazing," Shanice admitted. The thought of waiting 30 minutes for the late-night bus was exhausting. In Lisa's car, Shanice finally relaxed enough to ask the question that had been bothering her all day. "Do you think they're really going to cut positions?" Lisa kept, her eyes on the road. "Honestly, yes. But not for the reasons they're saying. Richard's been moving his favorites into key positions for months. Anyone who doesn't fit his idea of the right image has been getting pushed aside. You've just been more resistant than most." "I need this job," Shanice said quietly. "My grandma's medication got more expensive, and my student loans—" "I know, honey." Lisa stopped at a red light and turned to look at her. "But you deserve better than this place. You've got a degree, you're smart as hell. There's got to be something else out there for you. Not in this economy, not without more experience. And every time I try to get management experience here, I get blocked." The light turned green, and Lisa focused back on driving. "My mama used to say, sometimes the door that looks closed is just waiting for you to push harder." When they reached Shanice's apartment building, Lisa insisted on waiting until Shanice was safely inside before driving away. It was a small gesture that meant everything, knowing someone had her back. Shanice entered the apartment quietly, expecting her grandmother to be asleep. Instead, she found her at the kitchen table, sorting pills into a weekly organizer. "You're up late," Shanice said, setting down her bag. Her grandmother looked up with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Just getting organized for the week. How was work, baby?" "Challenging," Shanice answered honestly. She filled a glass with water and sat down at the table. "They might be cutting positions. There's a meeting tomorrow." Her grandmother's hand stilled. "You think your job's at risk?" Shanice hesitated, not wanting to worry her, but they'd always been honest with each other. "It's possible. The regional manager has never been my biggest fan, and now they're restructuring." Her grandmother closed the pill organizer with a decisive click. "You know what your grandfather would say about this? That I should keep my head down and wait it out? No, baby. He'd say it's time to show them exactly who they're dealing with." Her grandmother's eyes, despite her age, were sharp and clear. "You've been keeping track of everything, haven't you? All the little comments, the passed-over promotions?" Shanice nodded. "I have a whole notebook full." "Well, maybe it's time to use it." The suggestion surprised Shanice. Her grandmother had always preached patience and endurance. "You think I should file a complaint?" I think sometimes being patient just gives people more time to walk all over you. Her grandmother reached across the table and took Shanice's hand. Your grandfather endured 30 years of being overlooked and undervalued. On his deathbed, you know what he told me? He said his biggest regret was not standing up for himself when he had the chance. Shanice thought about the folded paper in her pocket with Lisa's cousin's number. I'm scared, she admitted. If I lose this job before finding another one, we'll manage, her grandmother said firmly. We always do. But you losing your spirit, your fire, that I couldn't bear to watch. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of the decision hanging between them. Get some sleep, her grandmother finally said. Tomorrow's meeting will tell you what you need to know. Then you can decide. Later, lying in bed, Shanice stared at the ceiling, too wired to sleep despite her exhaustion. The day's events replayed in her mind. Richard's criticism, the corporate woman's curious glances, Pete's warning, Lisa's support, her grandmother's unexpected advice. Something was coming to a head at Crispy Chicken Supreme, and she seemed to be at the center of it somehow. The question was, would she be a passive participant in whatever was about to unfold, or would she take control of her own narrative? She reached for her phone and set 2 alarms, one for 4:30 a.m. to make the mandatory meeting, and another for 8:00 a.m. when corporate headquarters opened. Whatever happened at tomorrow's meeting, she needed to be prepared for what came next. As sleep finally claimed her, Shanice's last thought was of the notebook she'd been keeping for 4 years. Maybe it was finally time to put all that documentation to use. The morning air was still dark and cool as Shanice hurried toward Crispy Chicken Supreme, her breath forming small clouds in front of her. Despite working late into the night on inventory, she'd managed to arrive 15 minutes before the mandatory 5 a.m. meeting. She wasn't going to give Richard any ammunition to use against her. The parking lot was fuller than usual for this hour. Through the windows, she could see her co-workers already gathered, their faces solemn in the harsh, fluorescent lighting. Whatever was coming, everyone seemed to sense it wasn't good news. Lisa was waiting by the door, 2 steaming cups in her hands. She offered one to Shanice. Figured you could use this. You were here late last night. Shanice accepted the coffee gratefully. Thanks. Any idea what this is about? Lisa lowered her voice. Dion's cousin works at the Westside location. They had their meeting yesterday. 3 positions eliminated just like that. A knot formed in Shanice's stomach. Which positions? 2 cashiers and a shift lead, all long-timers, all replaced with part-timers at lower pay. Before Shanice could respond, Pete pushed open the door. Everyone's waiting. Better get inside. The staff room was cramped with all 15 employees squeezed in. Richard stood at the front beside the corporate woman from yesterday. Vanessa, Shanice recalled. Tyler sat in the front row, looking oddly confident for someone who might be facing a layoff. Richard cleared his throat. Thank you all for coming in early. As you know, Crispy Chicken Supreme is always evolving to meet market demands and maintain profitability. Corporate has approved a restructuring plan for this district that will streamline operations and create a more efficient workflow. Shanice had heard enough corporate speak to know what was coming next. She steeled herself. Effective next Monday, we'll be consolidating several positions across the district. Some of you will be reassigned to different locations. Others will see changes in your hours or responsibilities. Richard's eyes scanned the room, not making contact with anyone in particular. And unfortunately, some positions will be eliminated entirely. A murmur ran through the group. Pete stared at the floor, clearly uncomfortable with what was happening. Have the list of affected employees here, Richard continued, holding up a folder. I'll be meeting with each of you individually after this meeting to discuss your specific situation. Vanessa stepped forward. I want to assure you all that these decisions were made after careful consideration of performance metrics, customer feedback, and operational needs. This isn't personal. It's business. But Shanice knew better. The tension in Richard's shoulders and the way he avoided looking at certain staff members told her everything she needed to know. This was very personal. Additionally, Richard said, his voice taking on a lighter tone, I'm pleased to announce that Tyler Johnson has been selected for the assistant manager position at our mall location. Effective immediately. Tyler beamed as a few half-hearted congratulations came from around the room. Shanice kept her expression neutral, though inside her thoughts were racing. Tyler had been at Crispy Chicken for less than 4 months. He regularly disappeared during rush periods. His register was frequently short, and yet he'd just been promoted to a position Shanice had applied for 3 times. As the meeting wound down and people began filing out, Richard called out names for the individual meetings. Williams, you'll be last. Wait here. Of course. Make her sweat it out while everyone else learned their fate. Shanice sat quietly, watching as her co-workers entered and exited the manager's office one by one. Some emerged looking relieved. Others, devastated. Lisa came out looking angry. She paused by Shanice's chair, transferred to the airport location. She whispered, 40-minute drive from my kids' school. They know I can't make that work with my schedule. Shanice squeezed her hand. I'm sorry. Dion was next, emerging with reddened eyes. Cut to part-time. No more benefits. Mom's gonna kill me. Her insurance, through my job, was covering her heart medication. One by one, the stories piled up. Longtime employees being shuffled to inconvenient locations, having their hours cut, or being eliminated entirely. And in every case, there seemed to be a common thread. These were the workers who had questioned policies, spoken up about unfair practices, or simply didn't fit Richard's preferred image. Finally, after nearly 2 hours, Shanice was the only one left waiting. Richard poked his head out of the office. Williams, you're up. The manager's office was small but had always felt like a fortress to the regular staff, a place where decisions were made that affected their lives but over which they had no control. Richard sat behind the desk, the corporate woman Vanessa standing beside him. Pete was nowhere. Sorry to be seen. Have a seat, Richard said, gesturing to the chair across from him. Shanice sat down, back straight, hands folded in her lap. I'll get right to the point, Richard began, opening a folder with her name on it. As part of our restructuring, your current position is being eliminated. Despite expecting it, the words still hit Shanice like a physical blow. 4 years of service ended just like that. However, he continued, we're offering you a transfer to our Highway 9 location. It would be a similar role, though at reduced hours. 25 hours per week maximum, which would make you part-time. Shanice did the calculation quickly. Highway 9 was an hour bus ride each way. 25 hours at her current wage would barely cover rent, let alone her grandmother's medication. May I ask why my position specifically is being eliminated? She asked, keeping her voice steady. Richard's expression hardened slightly. As I explained in the meeting, these decisions are based on performance metrics and operational needs. I see? And could I review those metrics? I'm curious where my performance has been lacking. Vanessa looked at Shanice with renewed interest. Richard shuffled papers uncomfortably. That won't be necessary. This isn't a performance review, it's a business decision. A business decision that seems to primarily affect certain employees, Shanice noted. Long-term employees. Employees who have spoken up about workplace issues. Employees who happen to be predominantly black and brown. Richard's face flushed. That's completely unfounded. We don't make staffing decisions based on race. Then what are they based on? Because I've applied for every management position that's opened in the past 2 years. I have a business degree. I've consistently received excellent customer feedback, and yet Tyler, who's been here less than 4 months, just got promoted to assistant manager. Tyler shows leadership potential, Richard said stiffly. And I don't. Despite training most of the staff here, including Tyler, Vanessa cleared her throat. These are fair questions, Richard. Ms. Williams deserves some clarity on the decision-making process. Richard shot her an annoyed look. The decision has been made, Vanessa. Ms. Williams can either accept the transfer or consider this her 2 weeks' notice. Shanice took a deep breath. This was the moment. The fork in the road her grandmother had spoken about. She could accept the transfer, which would effectively force her to quit when the logistics became impossible, or she could fight back. Before I make that decision, she said carefully, I'd like to understand something. The Highway 9 location is the farthest from my home. Is there a reason I'm being transferred there specifically, rather than to one of the 3 locations within the same bus route? Richard's jaw tightened. Staff allocations are made based on operational needs. I see. And my drawer being reported short last week. That was the first time in 4 years that's happened. I'd like to review the register tapes from that day. Those are confidential financial records. Actually, Vanessa interjected, employees have the right to review transaction records relevant to their performance evaluations. It's in the company handbook, section 4.3. Richard looked increasingly uncomfortable. We're getting off track here. Ms. Williams, you have 2 options. Accept the transfer or take the severance package. There's a third option, Shanice said, her heart pounding but her voice steady. I could file a formal complaint with corporate HR regarding what appears to be a pattern of discriminatory practices. The room went silent. Richard stared at her, his expression a mix of shock and anger. Vanessa's eyebrows rose slightly. That's a serious accusation, Vanessa said carefully. Do you have anything to substantiate such a claim? Shanice thought of her notebook filled with 4 years of documented incidents. She thought of Lisa's cousin in corporate HR. She thought of her grandmother's words about standing up for herself. Yes, she said simply. I do. Richard scoffed. This is ridiculous. You're being offered a reasonable alternative position. Claiming discrimination because you don't like the location. It's not just about the transfer, Shanice interrupted. It's about the consistently different standards applied to certain employees. It's about qualified people being passed over for promotions while less qualified candidates move ahead. It's about scheduling that makes it impossible for single parents to maintain their hours. It's about comments on Black employees' hair and appearance that aren't made about white employees. With each example, Richard's face grew redder. Vanessa, however, was watching Shanice with undisguised interest. These are concerning allegations, Vanessa said. If you do have documentation, I'd be interested in reviewing it. Richard stood abruptly. This meeting is over. Ms. Williams, you have until tomorrow to decide about the transfer. Vanessa, I need a word with you privately. Shanice remained seated. Actually, I've made my decision. I'm not accepting the transfer and I'm not quietly taking a severance package. I'll be filing a formal complaint with corporate headquarters today, and I'll be providing them with copies of all my documentation. Richard's eyes narrowed. Do you understand what you're doing? This could follow you in your career. Fast food is a small world, Williams. The threat was thinly veiled, but Shanice refused to be intimidated. I understand perfectly. I also understand that retaliation against an employee for filing a discrimination complaint is illegal under federal law. She stood up, gathering her dignity around her like armor. If there's nothing else, I have a shift to work. You're dismissed for the day, Richard snapped. With pay, he added hastily, glancing at Vanessa. Shanice nodded and walked out, her legs somehow carrying her despite feeling like they might give way at any moment. In the hallway, she leaned against the wall, taking deep breaths. She'd done it. After 4 years of staying quiet, of documenting but not acting, she'd finally spoken up. Outside, the morning sun had fully risen, warming the parking lot. Lisa was waiting by her car. What happened? She asked as soon as she saw Shanice. Transfer to Highway 9, reduced hours. When I questioned it, Richard basically threatened my career. Lisa swore under her breath. What are you going to do? Shanice squared her shoulders. I'm calling your cousin at corporate today. I've got 4 years of documentation and I'm not going down without a fight. Lisa's face broke into a smile. It's about damn time. She pulled out her keys. Come on, I'll drive you home. You can make the call from there. During the drive, Shanice felt a strange mix of terror and exhilaration. For so long, she'd played by the rules, kept her head down, tried to prove her worth through hard work and dedication. But the system wasn't designed to reward that, at least not for everyone equally. At home, her grandmother was surprised to see her so early. What happened, baby? Meeting didn't go well? Shanice sat at the kitchen table and told her everything. The eliminated position, the impossible transfer offer, her decision to file a complaint. Her grandmother listened quietly, then reached out and took Shanice's hands in hers. I'm proud of you. Standing up for yourself isn't easy, especially when there's so much at stake. I'm scared, Grandma. What if this backfires? We need my income. We need your dignity more. Her grandmother replied firmly. Money comes and goes, but once you let people take your dignity, it's hard to get it back. Shanice nodded and pulled out her phone and the folded paper Lisa had given her. Taking a deep breath, she dialed the number. HR department, this is Tanya speaking, came a professional voice. Hi, Tanya, my name is Shanice Williams. I worked at Crispy Chicken Supreme on Main Street. Lisa Johnson gave me your number. She said you might be able to help me file a formal complaint. There was a pause. Lisa's cousin, yes. She mentioned you might be calling. Can you tell me what's happening? For the next 30 minutes, Shanice laid out her situation. The years of subtle discrimination, the denied promotions, the sudden elimination of her position after she'd started asking questions. And you say you have documentation of all this? Tanya asked. Yes, 4 years worth. Every incident, every comment, every time I was passed over with dates and witnesses. That's unusual. Most employees don't keep such detailed records. My grandfather taught me to always keep receipts, Shanice explained, especially when you're playing a game with loaded dice. Tanya was quiet for a moment. Ms. Williams, what you're describing sounds like a potential pattern of discriminatory behavior. This isn't just about your position being eliminated. It's about a hostile work environment over an extended period. Exactly, Shanice agreed, relieved that someone understood. Here's what we need to do, Tanya continued, her tone turning businesslike. I'm going to send you a secure link to upload your documentation. Then I'd like you to come to corporate headquarters tomorrow morning to meet with me and the Director of Employee Relations. Can you do that? Yes, absolutely. Good. And one more thing. Don't discuss this with anyone at your location, not even Pete. We need to conduct our investigation without interference. After hanging up, Shanice sat back in her chair, feeling both drained and energized. She'd taken the first step. There was no turning back now. What did she say? Her grandmother asked. She's sending me a link to upload my documentation, and I have a meeting at corporate tomorrow. Her grandmother nodded approvingly. See? The door isn't closed, it just needed a good push. That evening, Shanice carefully photographed every page of her notebook and uploaded them to the secure link Tanya had sent. She included screenshots of text conversations with co-workers discussing problematic practices, copies of emails denying her promotion applications without clear reasons, and photos of the schedules showing how certain employees were consistently given preferential treatment. As she worked, her phone buzzed with messages from co-workers. News of her confrontation with Richard had spread. Heard what you did. About time, someone stood up to him, texted Dion, be careful. Richard's furious, wrote Pete, surprising her. He was on the phone with higher-ups all afternoon. Even Tyler reached out. Hey, nothing personal about the promotion. Richard told me you weren't interested in management track. Shanice stared at the last message in disbelief. That outright lie was just more evidence for her case. By midnight, she had compiled and uploaded everything. Tomorrow would bring a meeting that could change the trajectory of her career, for better or worse. As she finally lay down to sleep, her phone buzzed once more. It was Lisa. Just heard from my cousin. Your documentation is compelling and concerning. The director of HR is reviewing it personally tonight. Good luck tomorrow. You're making history, girl. Shanice smiled in the darkness. Whatever happened next, she'd stood up for herself. And for the first time in 4 years, she felt like maybe, just maybe, someone was actually listening. Crispy Chicken Supreme's corporate headquarters stood tall in the downtown business district, its glass facade reflecting the morning sun. Shanice stepped off the bus, adjusting her blazer, the one she'd worn to her college graduation, saved for special occasions. Today certainly qualified. The security guard at the front desk checked her ID and made a call. "Ms. Williams is here, for her 9 a.m. with HR," he said into the phone. A moment later, he handed her a visitor badge. "11th floor. Someone will meet you at the elevator." The lobby was all sleek marble and corporate branding, a world away from the greasy floors and plastic furniture of the store where she'd spent the last 4 years. As the elevator climbed, Shanice mentally rehearsed what she would say. She had the facts on her side, but facts alone didn't always win the day. When the doors opened, a woman was waiting for her, Lisa's cousin Tanya, recognizable from the family photos Lisa had shown her. "Ms. Williams, thank you for coming," Tanya said professionally, extending her hand. No acknowledgement of their connection passed between them, which Shanice understood. This needed to be by the book. "Thank you for seeing me," Shanice replied, equally formal. Tanya led her down a corridor lined with offices. "We'll be meeting in the conference room. Just to prepare you, there will be several people present, the director of HR, our legal counsel, and a few others." Shanice's pulse quickened. "I wasn't expecting legal to be involved already." "Your documentation raised some serious concerns," Tanya explained quietly. "This goes beyond a simple employee grievance." "You understand what I'm saying?" Shanice nodded. Her complaint wasn't just about her own situation. It potentially revealed a systemic problem. The conference room door was closed. Tanya paused before opening it. "Whatever happens in there, thank you for coming forward. It takes courage." Inside, 5 people sat around an oval table. Tanya introduced them one by one: Dr. Patricia Chen, Director of Human Resources; Benjamin West, Legal Counsel; Danielle Rodriguez, District Operations Manager; Jordan Taylor, Diversity and Inclusion Officer; and to Shanice's surprise, Vanessa from yesterday's meeting. "Ms. Williams," Dr. Chen began after Shanice was seated, "thank you for bringing these matters to our attention. I've reviewed your documentation, and I must say it's extremely thorough." 4 years of practice," Shanice replied, trying to keep her voice steady. "Indeed. Before we begin, I want to assure you that this meeting is confidential and protected. There will be no retaliation for anything discussed here." Mr. West, the lawyer, leaned forward. "That said, these are serious allegations that could have significant implications. We need to be absolutely clear about what you're claiming." Shanice straightened in her chair. "I'm claiming that Richard Keller has consistently applied different standards to different employees based on race and gender. I'm claiming that qualified individuals have been passed over for promotions in favor of less qualified candidates who fit Richard's preferred image. I'm claiming that the recent restructuring was designed, at least in part, to eliminate or marginalize employees who've questioned these practices." Ms. Rodriguez, the operations manager, made a note. "You've provided extensive documentation of your personal experiences. Do you believe this extends beyond you?" "Yes." Lisa Johnson was transferred to an impossible location despite having childcare constraints that Richard knows about. Deion Washington's hours were cut specifically to drop him below the benefits threshold, and those are just 2 examples from my location. "And you believe race was a factor?" asked Jordan Taylor. "I believe it's not coincidental that the employees most negatively impacted by Richard's decisions are predominantly people of color." "Yes," Vanessa spoke up. "I was at the Main Street location yesterday during the announcements. I observed some concerning patterns in how information was delivered and how certain employees were treated." Dr. Chen nodded. "Ms. Chen has been conducting an operational review of all district locations for the past month. Her observations align with some of your claims, Ms. Williams." This was news. Shanice glanced at Vanessa, who gave her a slight nod. "May I ask why this review was initiated?" Shanice asked. Dr. Chen and Mr. West exchanged looks. The lawyer nodded almost imperceptibly. "We've received several complaints about district management over the past 6 months," Dr. Chen explained. "None as detailed as yours, but enough to establish a pattern of concern. Additionally, there are some financial irregularities that caught our attention." "Financial irregularities?" Shanice echoed. "Yes. Discrepancies in reported sales, inventory shrinkage, and Unusual patterns in drawer shortages. The drawer shortages. Like the one Richard had suddenly attributed to Shanice last week after 4 years of balanced drawers. "Ms. Williams," Vanessa said, "your documentation provides a ground-level perspective that complements our broader review. It's been extremely valuable." Shanice processed this information. Her complaint hadn't initiated the investigation. It had accelerated one already in progress. "What happens now?" she asked. Dr. Chen folded her hands on the table. "We continue our investigation. Mr. Keller will be interviewed, as will other district managers and a selection of employees from each location. And my position? The transfer?" "On hold," Ms. Rodriguez assured her. "No personnel changes from the restructuring will be implemented until our review is complete." "That's something at least," Shanice murmured. "There's more," Dr. Chen added. "Based on what we've already uncovered, we believe a more comprehensive district-wide evaluation is warranted. We'd like you to be part of that process, Ms. Williams." Shanice blinked in surprise. "Me? How?" "Your business degree, your attention to detail, your understanding of day-to-day operations. These would be valuable assets to our evaluation team," Dr. Chen explained. "We'd like to offer you a temporary position as an operational consultant during this review period. It would be at a significantly higher pay rate than your current position, of course." Shanice struggled to keep her expression neutral. This was the last thing she'd expected when walking into the meeting. I'm interested. What exactly would this role entail?" "You'd work with Ms. Chen," Dr. Chen gestured to Vanessa. "Visiting different locations, reviewing practices, interviewing staff. You know the operation from the ground up. What questions to ask, what to look for. You'd help us identify issues that might not be apparent to those of us who haven't worked in-store for years, if ever." It sounded too good to be true. "And after the review is complete?" "That depends on the findings," Ms. Rodriguez said candidly. "But based on your qualifications and what we've seen so far, I can tell you that management track positions will definitely be available to qualified internal candidates." The meeting continued for another hour, with Shanice answering detailed questions about specific incidents in her documentation. By the end, she felt wrung out but strangely exhilarated. As the meeting concluded, the executives filed out, leaving Shanice with Tanya and Vanessa. "You did well," Vanessa told her. "Not many people would stand their ground like that, especially against someone with Richard's influence in the district." "Richard's days of influence may be numbered," Tanya added, allowing herself a small smile, now that the formal meeting was over. "So what happens now exactly?" Shanice asked. "Practically speaking, you go back to work tomorrow, same schedule," Vanessa explained. "Act normally. Don't discuss this meeting with anyone, not even those you trust. Richard will be called in for his own meeting later this week. Won't he suspect something when I show up instead of transferring to Highway 9? "Let us worry about that," Tanya assured her. "For now, just document any additional incidents. The real work begins next week when the official review launches." As Shanice left corporate headquarters, her mind was spinning with the morning's revelations. She'd gone in expecting, at best, to have her personal grievance addressed. Instead, she'd become part of something much larger, a full investigation that could reshape the entire district. Her grandmother was waiting anxiously when she got home. "How did it go?" she asked as soon as Shanice walked through the door. Shanice set down her bag and sank into a chair. "Not at all like I expected. They already knew. They've been investigating Richard for months." She explained the meeting, the pre-existing investigation, and the consultant position they'd offered her. With each detail, her grandmother's eyes grew wider. "Lord have mercy," she finally said when Shanice finished. "So all this time you were documenting everything? They were building their own case?" "Seems that way. They just didn't have the ground-level perspective I provided." Her grandmother reached over and squeezed her hand. "Your grandfather would be so proud. He always said you had a fighter's spirit, even when you were little." The next morning, Shanice arrived at work as usual. Her conversation, with corporate locked away behind a professional demeanor. She could feel the other employees watching her curiously. Everyone knew she'd been slated for transfer. Her continued presence was certain to raise questions. She'd barely tied on her apron when Pete hurried over. Richard called. "He wants to see you in the office before opening." Shanice nodded, betraying nothing. "Thanks, Pete." In the small office, Richard was waiting, his expression thunderous. "Williams, surprised to see you here." "Good morning, Mr. Keller," she replied evenly. "I was told to report to my regular shift." "By whom exactly?" "Our conversation yesterday was quite clear. You're being transferred to Highway 9. Shanice met his gaze steadily. "I received a call from HR last night. All personnel changes are on hold pending review." Richard's face flushed. "That's absurd. I wasn't informed of any such decision." "I can only tell you what I was told, sir," Shanice said, maintaining her composure despite the satisfaction bubbling inside her. Richard pulled out his phone. "This is ridiculous. I'm calling Patricia right now." Shanice waited quietly as he dialed. The one-sided conversation that followed was illuminating. "Patricia, it's Richard." "Yes, I know it's early, but we have a situation. One of the employees, slated for transfer, is claiming the restructuring is on hold." "Williams, yes, what do you mean, correct? These plans were approved weeks ago." "A review? What review? Since when?" "But I wasn't—" "Yes, I understand the concept of internal investigation." His face grew progressively redder as the conversation continued. Finally, he hung up, glaring at Shanice as if she personally had orchestrated his humiliation. "It seems there's been a miscommunication," he said stiffly. "You'll continue in your current position until further notice." "Thank you for clarifying, sir," Shanice replied, somehow keeping the triumph out of her voice. "Will that be all?" Richard looked like he wanted to say more, much more, but simply waved her away. "Get to your station. We open in 20 minutes. The morning passed in a blur of routine tasks, but underneath the surface, everything had changed. Shanice could feel it in the way Richard avoided the main floor, in the curious glances from coworkers who'd expected her to be gone, in the whispered conversations that stopped when she approached. During her break, Lisa cornered her in the staff room. "Girl, what is happening?" Richards locked himself in the office making phone calls. "And you're still here when you're supposed to be halfway to Highway 9. Shanice shook her head slightly. "I can't talk about it." Lisa's eyes widened. "Oh my God, you did it. You actually did it." "Lisa, please," Shanice whispered. "I really can't discuss it, not here." Understanding dawned on Lisa's face. "Say no more, just know I've got your back, whatever's going down." By lunchtime, the atmosphere in the restaurant had grown distinctly strange. Richard emerged from the office looking shaken, made a brief circuit of the restaurant, then left abruptly without explanation. Pete took over supervision, looking confused but relieved. "Everything okay with Richard?" Shanice asked innocently when Pete passed her register. Pete shrugged. "Said he had a district emergency, never seen him like that before, like he'd seen a ghost." The ghost of his career, perhaps, Shanice thought, but didn't say. The rest of the day passed relatively normally, though whispers continued among the staff. Shanice focused on her work, giving nothing away. Tomorrow would bring enough drama without her adding to it today. That evening, her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Meeting moved up. Richard called in tomorrow. You start Monday as consultant." V. Things were moving faster than expected. Shanice showed the text to her grandmother, who smiled broadly. "Looks like the wind's changing direction, baby, and not a moment too soon." The next morning, Shanice went to work as usual, but Richard never showed. Pete seemed increasingly bewildered, checking his phone constantly for updates. "Richard's not coming in today," he finally told the staff during a quiet moment. "District meeting, apparently. I'm in charge until further notice." Shanice caught Lisa's eye across the restaurant. Something big was happening, and they both knew it. Just before the lunch rush, Shanice's phone buzzed again. "It's done. Richard on administrative leave pending full review. Report to HQ Monday, 8 a.m. via administrative leave. The first step in what would likely be a permanent separation." Shanice felt a complex mix of emotions. Vindication, certainly, but also a strange kind of sadness. She'd never wanted anyone to lose their job, She just wanted fair treatment for everyone. As she pocketed her phone, she noticed Pete watching her curiously. Had he seen her reaction to the text? Did he suspect she was somehow connected to what was happening? She couldn't read his expression. The lunch rush hit, busy as always, and Shanice fell into the familiar rhythm of taking orders, handling food, managing the flow of customers. For a few hours, the corporate drama receded, and she was just a fast food worker doing her job. Then, at exactly 2:15 p.m., the front door opened and Vanessa walked in, accompanied by two people Shanice recognized from the meeting at corporate, Ms. Rodriguez and Mr. Taylor. They weren't in uniform or wearing name tags, but their business attire stood out among the casual customers. Pete emerged from the office immediately, clearly surprised. "Can I help you?" Ms. Rodriguez showed him an ID badge. "We're from corporate. We need to speak with you privately." As Pete led them to the office, Vanessa caught Shanice's eye and gave her a subtle nod. Whatever they were here for, it was serious. For the next hour, different employees were called into the office one by one. Some emerged looking confused, others worried, a few actually relieved. Shanice continued working, pretending not to notice the extraordinary situation unfolding around her. Finally, it was her turn. "Williams," Pete called. "They'd like to speak with you now." In the office, Vanessa, Ms. Rodriguez, and Mr. Taylor sat on one side of the desk. Pete stood awkwardly by the door. "Ms. Williams," Ms. Rodriguez began, "we've been conducting interviews with staff as part of our review. Your name has come up repeatedly as someone with comprehensive knowledge of the restaurant's operations." Pete shifted uncomfortably. This was clearly news to him. "I've worked every station over the past 4 years," Shanice confirmed, playing along with the pretense that this was their first serious conversation. "Indeed. We're particularly interested in your observations regarding scheduling practices, promotion decisions, and day-to-day management under Mr. Keller's direction." For the next 30 minutes, Shanice answered their questions carefully, aware of Pete's presence and the need to maintain the facade of an impartial witness, rather than someone already working with corporate. She provided facts without editorial commentary, specific incidents without emotional language. "Thank you for your candor," Mr. Taylor said when they'd finished. "This has been extremely helpful." As Shanice stood to leave, Ms. Rodriguez added, "By the way, we've reviewed your personnel file. Your application for the management training program was inexplicably stalled. We've approved it effective immediately, with a start date of next Monday." Pete's eyebrows shot up. "Management training? But Richard said she never applied." "Oh, she applied," Vanessa confirmed. "Multiple times. The applications were simply never forwarded to district for approval. The implications of this statement hung in the air." Pete looked stunned, then troubled as the pieces began falling into place. Shanice managed to keep her expression neutral, though inside, she was soaring. "Thank you for the opportunity. I look forward to beginning the program." As she left the office, she could feel the weight of years lifting from her shoulders. She'd done it. Not just secured her own position, but potentially helped change the system that had held back so many others. When her shift ended, she found Vanessa waiting for her in the parking lot. "I shouldn't be telling you this," Vanessa said quietly, "but I thought you deserved to know. Richard won't be returning to Crispy Chicken Supreme. The financial discrepancies alone were enough for termination. What will happen to everyone else, the transfers, the hour cuts? All reversed. And there will be a district-wide review of all promotion decisions made under his leadership." Shanice absorbed this news. "So when I come in Monday, you'll be arriving at corporate as both a management trainee and a consultant for our review team," Vanessa confirmed. "Your insight will be invaluable in rebuilding this district the right way." As Vanessa walked away, Shanice stood still for a moment, letting reality sink in. 4 years of documenting, of keeping her head down, of working twice as hard for half the recognition, and now, in the SR, and of a few days, everything had changed. Her phone buzzed with a text from Lisa. "Just heard from Pete. Is it true? Management training, corporate consultant. Girl, you've been holding out on me." Shanice smiled and typed a reply. Long story. Can I tell you over coffee tomorrow? Then she called her grandmother to share the news. As the phone rang, she looked back at the crispy chicken supreme sign glowing in the evening light. For 4 years, that sign had represented frustration and limitation. Now somehow it had become the launching pad for something much bigger than she'd ever imagined. Her grandmother answered, and Shanice took a deep breath. "Grandma," she said, her voice full of wonder and pride. "You're not going to believe what just happened." The morning sun streamed through the windows of Crispy Chicken Supreme's corporate headquarters as Shanice walked through the lobby, employee badge clipped to her blazer. 2 weeks had passed since Richard had been placed on administrative leave. 2 weeks that had transformed Shanice's life in ways she was still processing. The security guard smiled in recognition. "Morning, Ms. Williams. Big day today, isn't it?" "Morning, Harold. Yes, it certainly is." In the elevator, Shanice checked her reflection in the mirrored walls. The woman who looked back at her wore the same face but carried herself differently, shoulders, back, chin up. A quiet confidence in her eyes. The management training program had been intense but exhilarating. For the first time in years, she was being challenged, her ideas taken seriously. Her potential recognized. Dr. Chen was waiting when the elevator doors opened on the executive floor, a floor Shanice had visited only once before during her initial interview. "Good morning, Shanice. Ready for today's announcement?" "As ready as I'll ever be," Shanice replied honestly. Dr. Chen smiled. "Nervous is normal, but trust me, you've earned this." They walked together toward the large conference room where district managers usually gathered for quarterly meetings. Today, however, the room would hold representatives from every Crispy Chicken Supreme location in the district, store managers, assistant managers, and selected staff. A corporate-wide announcement of changes resulting from the review Shanice had helped conduct, changes that would directly affect her. "Before we go in," Dr. Chen said, pausing outside the conference room, "I wanted to thank you personally. Your courage in coming forward, your insight during the review process, they've been invaluable. You've helped us identify problems we might have missed for years." Shanice nodded, touched by the acknowledgement. "I just did what felt right." "That's exactly why you're perfect for this position," Dr. Chen replied. "Now, let's not keep everyone waiting." The conference room was already full when they entered. Shanice recognized most of the faces. Pete from her old store, managers from other locations, corporate staff she'd worked with during the review process. At the back of the room stood Lisa and several other frontline workers who'd been invited. To represent staff interests, Lisa gave her a subtle thumbs up. In the past 2 weeks, their friendship had deepened as they'd found themselves working together on the district review. Lisa providing additional perspective from longtime employees, Shanice coordinating between corporate and staff. Ms. Rodriguez stood at the front of the room. "Now that everyone's here, let's begin. Thank you all for coming on short notice. As you know, we've been conducting a comprehensive review of district operations following some concerning discoveries. That review is now complete, and we're ready to announce the resulting changes." A murmur ran through the room. Everyone knew about Richard's administrative leave, but the full extent of the review findings had been kept confidential. "First," Ms. Rodriguez continued, "I regret to inform you that Richard Keller has been terminated from his position as regional manager, effective immediately." Despite the rumors that had been circulating, the official announcement still sent a shockwave through the room. Richard had been with the company for over a decade, his influence extending into every aspect of district operations. The review uncovered multiple policy violations, including financial discrepancies, discriminatory promotion practices, and manipulation of employee records. These violations are completely contrary to our company values and will not be tolerated at any level. Ms. Rodriguez paused to let this sink in. Shanice noticed several managers exchanging nervous glances. Richard hadn't acted alone in all of his schemes. Second, we'll be implementing a new district structure to prevent similar issues in the future. This includes more transparent promotion processes, regular corporate reviews of location level decisions, and a direct feedback channel for employees to report concerns without fear of retaliation. She gestured to Mr. Taylor, who stood up. My team will be conducting training sessions at each location over the next month to ensure everyone understands the new policies and procedures. Participation is mandatory for all management and strongly encouraged for all staff. Ms. Rodriguez nodded and continued. Third, we'll be reviewing all promotion decisions made in the past 3 years. Any employee who was passed over unfairly will be offered appropriate compensation and future opportunities. Lisa caught Shanice's eye from across the room, her expression a mix of disbelief and vindication. This went beyond anything they'd hoped for. Finally, Ms. Rodriguez said, her tone shifting slightly, we need to announce a new leadership structure for the district. After careful consideration, we've decided to split Richard's former position into 2 roles, Operations Director and Personnel Director. This will ensure proper oversight of both business operations and employee relations. The room grew very still. These were significant positions, typically filled from outside or by promoting long-serving managers. For Operations Director, we've selected Brandon Taylor from our downtown location. Brandon has consistently demonstrated excellence in operational management and financial oversight. Brandon, a manager Shanice knew by reputation as fair and detail-oriented, nodded solemnly from his seat near the front. For the newly created position of District Personnel Director, Ms. Rodriguez continued, we've selected someone who has demonstrated exceptional insight into our organizational culture, a commitment to equity, and a rare ability to connect with staff at all levels. Shanice felt Dr. Chen's hand on her shoulder, gently urging her forward. She stood on legs that suddenly felt unsteady. Shanice Williams will be taking on this critical role, effective immediately. The room erupted in murmurs. Shanice could feel all eyes turning to her, some surprised, some confused, some openly approving. Lisa was beaming, her hands clasped over her mouth in delighted shock. Shanice joined our management training program just 2 weeks ago, Ms. Rodriguez explained, but has already distinguished herself through her contributions to our district review. Her business degree, combined with her 4 years of frontline experience and exceptional analytical skills, make her uniquely qualified to rebuild our personnel systems from the ground up. Shanice stepped forward, her heart pounding but her voice steady when she spoke. Thank you for this opportunity. I'm committed to creating a workplace where everyone is valued, where promotion is based on merit, and where diverse perspectives are seen as the assets they truly are. The meeting continued with discussions of implementation timelines and transition plans, but Shanice barely heard them. District Personnel Director, a position that would allow her to address the very issues she'd documented for years. A seat at the table where decisions were made. When the meeting adjourned, people gathered in small clusters, processing the announcements. Several approached Shanice to offer congratulations, some genuine, others clearly calculating what the shift in power meant for them. Pete made his way to her, looking both impressed and slightly embarrassed. Congratulations, Shanice, I always knew you had potential. Did you? Shanice asked mildly, remembering the many times he'd stood by while Richard undermined her. I'm glad to hear it. I'll be counting on all location managers to support these changes. He caught her meaning and nodded awkwardly. Of course. 100%. Lisa pushed through the crowd and gave Shanice a quick hug. District Personnel Director, when you aim high, you don't mess around. Shanice laughed. Trust me, I'm as surprised as anyone. 2 weeks ago, I was working register and trying to figure out how to pay for